Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. A very happy new year to you. Welcome to our show, Ghosts Are Near, where we discuss various aspects of the paranormal and paranormal phenomenon. I am your host, Keith Johnson. With me is my co-host and co-founder of N.E.A.R, Sandra Johnson.
I am all of those things. Hello there.
And Carl is in the control booth. He is actually directing tonight.
He is the director for the night. I am so proud of him.
So
go, Carl.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for directing. Now, I want to welcome our studio audience. Hello, studio audience. Nice to have you with us.
Hey there.
Yeah.
Oh, and I want to welcome our new crew member, Mr. Nathan Mayer. We're very glad to have him doing our graphics now. Go, Nathan.
Mm-hmm. We have a special person on camera, too.
Yes.
It's filled in before.
Who must be mentioned.
Right. Hello, Matt Moniz of Spooky South Coast,
Yay!
Science Advisor. Now, I'm going to start out by reading a little email, a fan letter we received.
We get those now and then.
Yes, we do. I want to read them now and then. To Keith and Sandra Johnson. Hello, guys. I want to say thank you for the show. Ghosts Are Near is the only show I watch on the internet. The shows are very informative, and I certainly learn something every time I watch. I can't tell you how important this is to me. I've been wanting to send you an email for the longest time to share these words with you. I'm a big fan, and I also would like to know if I can come by during a taping of the show. You know, live audience. Sounds like fun. Keep up the good work. Carl, you too. John Riato. And John, sure, you can be a member of the studio audience anytime you want. We'd be very glad to have you. We'd welcome you. I think that's so nice to get a letter like that, don't you?
Oh, yes, I do. And thank you very much, John. Ghosts Are Near is the only show that I watch on the internet, too.
We're watching it right now, actually, on the prompter. Well, without further ado, I would like to introduce our special guest for this evening, Chris Balzano of Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads.
Hello.
And Christopher Balzano is a teacher and writer from the Boston area. He is the founder and director of Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads, an online collection of legends and ghost stories from Massachusetts and the surrounding states. As an investigator of the paranormal for more than 10 years, he has been writing about those experiences for the past 5. He has been a contributor to Jeff Belanger's Encyclopedia of Haunted Places and was one of the writers behind Weird Hauntings. His writings has been featured in Haunted Times and Mystery Magazine and has been covered by the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald, the Standard Times, and the Worcester Magazine. He currently lives in Woburn, Massachusetts with his wife and son. And Chris has also written a book called Dark Woods, and I've just finished reading it. Very, very fascinating read, and we're certainly going to discuss that.
I love the cover, by the way.
I know, isn't that
Yes, that's actually...
it's very striking.
The cover is actually, oddly enough, taken during the day. It's actually a daytime picture.
Wow.
Taken by one of the members of the Spooky South Coast audience in an attempt to... That was in a contest to see who could design their Spooky South Coast emblem for their shirts and things like that.
Oh.
And that was a runner-up. And I said, well, can I steal the Spooky South Coast thing, take that off, and use it for the cover? And he was delighted to do it. So it's a really amazing picture. You write a book and you put a lot into it, and then it comes and it looks that nice. And you say, I don't even care what's in it at this point. It just looks like a real book.
Yeah. Just
You
look
know,
at the
so
cover.
hopefully the inside's as good as the outside. But
I know.
Yeah,
it really does. So seriously, though, it really sets the mood for the content.
You know, I think it does because, Dark Woods, you expect it naturally to be about something very dark, very evil and scary, and the Freetown State Forest is all those things, but there's also this weird light, too. So that blue is kind of, ominous, and it's kind of some spooky things going on there, but there's also something light about it and something hopeful, and I hope that comes across, too.
Right. So it really says it all. really does. So, before we get into the book itself, tell us a little bit more about Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads, the inception of it, and
Sure.
what goes into it. And
Sure. I started the website in 2002, and at that time was really kind of before the paranormal website boom. And there weren't a lot of things that focused just on different areas. Those hadn't really developed yet. You had the New England Paranormal Research and some of these, ones that have now stood the test of time, but there weren't a lot of Massachusetts sites or Rhode Island sites that had like a wide audience. And I thought, well, there was nothing in Massachusetts. I could really corner this. Like, people are going to start to want to specialize things. People are going to want to start to be able to look at their own place or where they're from. So I put it up there with the idea of, I want to catch urban legends and paranormal cases and put them next to each other and kind of see where the crossroads is between the two of them, like when a true legend or when a legend goes from being truthful to kind of changing up a little bit and becoming more kind of part of the myth of an area.
Yes, I heard it from a friend of a friend.
Right, right. So actually the original website name was very, very long because it was Massachusetts Ghosts and Legends and all this other stuff. But I finally came, the crossroads is what I'm interested in. That place
it's a
where
very concise, very
the place where
name.
where the two things intersect. So. So, and then, it also has this great connotation of, the crossroads where, Robert Johnson sold his soul and all these other really great images that go along with it, too. So.
Right, yeah. So what started your interest in paranormal research?
Well, like a lot of people, I grew up watching horror movies and loving a good ghost story. And then when I went to college, I went to Emerson, and my dorm was the haunted Charlesgate Hotel.
Oh, okay.
Right there in Kenmore Square, which had this really great history of all these hauntings, generation from generation, from its days as a mafia hotel, through tenement housing, through BU housing, and then Emerson, especially being, a college that was kind of, especially at that time, linked with a lot of occult practices. The banning of the Ouija board in Charlesgate and these really mysterious things that were going on there and little cults that were developing around it. And I just started kind of just experiencing things there. And once again, all these weird, colleges are probably one of the best places to get urban legends where things get twisted. Right. And so I started to see some of the hauntings that my friends were telling me getting twisted as they were being told to other people. And so I started to say, well, I wonder if this is happening other places. And so I came out to, the first place I really investigated was Rehoboth because of the New England Ghost Files book.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And this was, 94, 95, when you could still buy it on the shelf in a bookstore. It was kind of, hadn't really kind of become legendary the way it is now. And it was like, I really want a place where I can share these. And so I put it up there, and the more you put up there, the more people respond to what you're doing and do stories. And so before you know it, you've been at it long enough that you're considered somewhat of an authority. And so that's kind of really how I got into it, kind of broke into it.
Okay.
What did you start with in Rehoboth?
The first thing was the Red-Headed Hitchhiker.
Yeah, okay.
Because, I mean, that's the essence of the crossroads experience, of that changing. And then it went on to Horbine School.
Did you experience any?
Feet. I got feet. The two people I went with had their feet tugged at while they were there.
Oh.
And they were kind of weirded out by that. And then that night, by completely, like something rustling in the breeze, we got scared at the Palmer River Burial Grounds. And then I was hooked from there. And then we took about 6 rolls of film, all of them disappeared on the way home. We got home, we couldn't find any of the evidence we had taken, and so...
The rolls of film themselves disappeared?
Yep. We would take a roll, put it in the glove compartment. When we got home, the glove compartment was completely empty. No maps, no anything was in there, including all the evidence we had taken.
Could it have been that somebody just rifled through the car, or
I mean,
the car was, were you in it the whole time?
No, the car was locked.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, between the last time the evidence was taken, we were in the car the entire time. So in other words, we came running and screaming from Palmer River Burial Ground, put the evidence in there, and by the time we were home, it was gone. So it wasn't like it was left unopened or left open for
something didn't want you to go home with that evidence, huh?
I've heard that a few times about different places in the Bridgewater Triangle. The evidence kind of has a habit of disappearing while you're there, and I've lost a lot of good evidence, a lot of good time spent out in the field, get home, and it's like, well, no, this camera was going, the batteries were flashing, the whole thing, and yet there's nothing on the roll, or There's nothing in the little disc, or the tape recorder broke down. A few times. I taped Matt Moniz actually telling a story about one of the locations in the Freetown State Forest, and every single time something went wrong with the tape.
Wow.
So I think there is something energy-wise that kind of maybe wants to give you a hint and a picture of what's going on, but doesn't want you to look at it straight on. So
Right. Yeah.
So it adds to the mystery of the whole place.
Okay.
Do you go along with the ley line theory?
You know, I go along with that can be a theory. I've yet to discover whether there are actual ley lines that kind of correspond with the forest. I definitely go along with the energy.
Haven't been in there with your dowsing rods, in other words.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's you know, especially some place like the Assonet Ledge, heavy granite, a lot of water running through it, you know,
Yeah,
Taunton
right.
River, ocean. I mean, so it's
Energy
all the
source,
elements,
yeah.
not to mention all the grief and the sorrowful things that have happened
Yeah.
there. Kind of put it all together, and it's, you know, pick your poison. Which, you know, what theory do you subscribe to about how ghosts are potentially trapped here or
right.
find here? And it's there at some of these places in there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, okay. The book itself, I mean, Dark Woods basically refers to Freetown, the Freetown area, cults, crime, and paranormal in the Freetown State Forest.
Yeah.
Now, I tell you, this is one of those books that you can hardly put it down. I mean, you start reading it, and it's just like you want to see what happens next,
Right.
especially if you're a local, you know, and it will give you an eerie feeling if you live in the area and you haven't yet experienced it. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, too. They've experienced things like this.
Yeah, I mean, I came here and I was talking about the book with some of the people in the studio, and they had their own kind of stories to contribute right there. So anyone that's in this area can remember, especially the crime section, can remember the cases, can remember James Cater, and can remember Carl Drew, and can remember the highway killings, and it's just kind of a part of their culture. But then also can remember, oh yeah, I used to hear about weird things that were going on in the forest, or you know, I was there once with my friends and we saw something. So it definitely kind of, you know, hits upon something that's all about southeastern Mass and then kind of into Rhode Island.
Right.
So
of course, a lot of it goes back to the history of King Philip's War.
Right.
It was known as King Philip's War, and of course, we all know about the incredible amount of treachery and suffering that went on there.
Right. And in many ways, the Freetown, in terms of a town, is kind of a spark for that, because the patch of land that is now Freetown, which included Fairhaven, Fall River, Tiverton, Rhode Island, was all part of the same purchase, which was, in one respect, it was meant to help settle some of Massasoit's drinking debts, because I guess he had spent too much time in the Plymouth bars and then kind of run up quite a tab. So this was kind of like, we'll wipe out your father's debts if you kind of let us buy this land.
Right.
And then in addition to it, the Wampanoag who signed for it, his death was actually what was the immediate trigger to the King Philip's War. So, what's his name? Jim Sossamon. His death kind of started the whole series of events that started King Philip's War. He was the Wampanoag person who signed that land purchase. So,
And he had
Freetown
adopted
is
the Christian faith.
Right. He was what they called a praying Indian. And he had signed, you know, in good faith and all that stuff, and they just kind of put the parcel of land aside. And then a few years later, his assassination or his murder, mysterious murder, kind of sparked the King Philip's War, because Plymouth then put to death the people who they felt were responsible for him dying.
Right.
And the Wampanoags were, wait a minute, this is a Native American crime. This is a Wampanoag crime being tried in a Plymouth court. You don't have that kind of authority over us.
Right.
And then when they kind of went into war council to decide what was going to happen, there was a full lunar eclipse. So this kind of paranormal event struck just at the right time, you know. And they said, this is our sign that we need to go to war. And so King Philip's War broke out.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, because in doing the research for the book, things like that were clicking all the time. You know, that the person who, you know, John Sussman was the signer of the Wampanoags on the Freetown Purchase, the moon eclipse, which, you know, struck again at the core with the paranormal. All the things were kind of like falling like tumblers in a lock, and it's like, maybe there is something to this cursed county, or this idea that there's something.
Like the point you bring out, a very good point, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
Does this, are paranormal activities attracted to this area, or are they created there?
Right.
You know.
Right. It's you know,
we don't know the answer, but
I think it's very, you know, it happens in cycles, and it kind of draws. And
right.
Can you talk a little bit about the cult activity?
Sure.
Takes
Well,
place in the area?
as you find in any kind of rural town, cults that are drawn to it. So you have solo practitioners, you have very disorganized cults that are there, the majority of which are not criminal and are just practicing their First Amendment right to freedom of religion.
Right.
But there's something about the energy there with people that I've spoken to, whether they be Wiccans or whether they be people that practice something a little bit darker, say that there's a very tangible change in the energy when you're there. This has been tapped into by a little bit more organized cults. So what you had were, over the course of 20, 30 years, different organized cults who were connected to all type of crime in southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island, who would use the Freetown State Forest is kind of a place to do their ceremonies and tap into that energy to kind of use whether it's to control of the people or just to connect with something dark energy that they were feeling. But then they would also use it to remain hidden and to remain so the watching eyes couldn't follow them. And people paid so much attention to the small cults they were finding, the people who were burning and wearing robes, and that they weren't really noticing that there was something very criminal and very dark that was also there, that was kind of flying under the radar.
Right.
And so they were responsible for several murders, and definitely a lot of the violent crime that was happening in the forest over the past 30 years.
Cult crimes and cult activity, unless it's something like the Manson murders or something, but in an area like Freetown, it doesn't really make the local press a lot, does it?
No,
I mean,
no.
You see it, and then it's gone, and you don't really hear the follow-up.
Right. Some of the first articles I found were more about, this weird thing happened, but that stuff doesn't happen anymore. That's just some old, people who are still stuck on the old times, wanting to, relive the glory days, or just teenagers who want to, it's like, well, yes, but, that cow was completely drained of all its blood with not a speck on the ground. I don't think there are many 16-year-olds listening to heavy metal music and going out and doing that. There's something, there's something darker doing that. And it becomes very much, there was, for example, one case with a person who had cut his leg, written the Our Father, mirror reflection and backwards, and it desecrated a nativity scene. Disturbing? Yes. But, I mean, hardly, definitely not a violent crime. And yet, I cover in the book when they found an underground bunker in the forest that had, remains of children's clothes, with blood and with sweat, weapons down there, balls with the eyes poked out, upside-down crosses and swords and knives, and chairs with bindings on them. These were the more disturbing things that were going on. So it wasn't just teenagers or people who were just practicing their God-given or their American-given right to religion. There was also something very violent and scary happening there too.
So in this case, we know which came first, the chicken and the.
Right.
I mean, the current or the energy was there first, and it attracted these cults. Whereas I know, for Keith and I, we talk a lot about. People ask us, well, why could cemeteries be haunted? Right. And we talk about, satanic cults coming in and doing these practices. And
it's not necessarily locals that are doing this. They're drawn to this place for a reason, because there is that. The example I like to give is a case where there was a local person who was a homeless person, and when a local drug dealer thought that he was a cop. And so he brought him into the forest. Well, normally in that circumstance, you beat the person up, or you maybe even shoot and kill them. Well, because of the energy of the forest and this negative thing that's going on, he actually set him on fire and let him burn alive.
Oh, wow.
You know what I'm saying? So there's this kind of disproportionate amount of violence that you're saying. And another great example is Cater. Now, Cater abducted Aruda from Brockton, and passed several places where he could have done what he wanted to do along the way.
20-minute drive, on a good day, and
instead, he passed up, what is it, Massasoit State Park. He passed up all these other places, and specifically went into the Freetown State Forest. And you have to ask yourself why.
Yeah, right. Now here's it's a picture of a wooded pathway here, and typical, New England. But the caption really has to get you. The view from the parking lot where a car was attacked by a zombie.
Yes.
You're going to have to elaborate on that one.
Well, that's actually that's the second report I got of activity in Freetown. The first being a place in the Assonet Ledge. The second, someone saying, We were attacked by zombies. This is how she phrased it. We were attacked by zombies, and now because of it, my brother is a ranger.
Oh.
So when that's the first email you get, you say, okay, you have to tell me. You have to follow that up. You have to tell me why you did that. But in Freetown, whether it's criminals who are, or victims who are drugged and dazed, or people who are just buried in very shallow graves and wake up because they're not, or whether it has something to do with the Cape Verdean and Portuguese culture and forms of voodoo, such as Santeria and Palamau, there are these people, who are people, walking around the Freetown State Forest, sometimes late at night, covered in dirt, as if they've just dug themselves out. And they seem to have the uncanny ability to chase down anyone who they see without ever running. So they have that very kind of slow jaunt
the way
and
it's
catch
described,
people.
it's just like something out of Night of the Living Dead, and yet these people have actually experienced this.
Well, anyone who's been in the Freetown State Forest at night, first of all, they're crazy if they've been in the Freetown State Forest at night, but anyone who's been there at night knows that there's a lot there that can scare you. So when you see someone there and they're kind of lumbering a little bit, you might joke with your friends, oh, look at that, must be some weirdo. And then when that person starts coming at you, your anxiety level goes up a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And what happens is these are people who were in the forest for one reason or another and then found themselves being chased by these beings who they wouldn't necessarily define as ghosts, wouldn't define as entirely there or normal. But the way that they describe them, and some people even use the word zombie, so I've kind of characterized some of these attacks as zombie attacks. They're not after brains.
Right.
They're not that kind of zombie, but they're more of like that traditional.
Somewhat reassuring.
Yeah, well, if you, just in case you were thinking about going to the forest at night, chances are you won't have your brain eaten, but kind of more the traditional sense of a zombie.
Yeah.
They're out there, having just been dug up from somewhere. And that fits in with what, in terms of the true crime, fits in with what the police say is that there's people buried there that we'll never find, or, if you take someone into the middle of the woods and just daze them, it might be days before they're found. So if you ask them, whether it's the quarry at the Assonet Ledge or whether it's deeper parts of the forest, there's bodies there that they'll never find.
Now, I know there's a particular term which Sandra's been kind of curious about. She wants to ask you about it.
Okay. I think I know where you're going with this, but...
I just want you to tell everyone about puckwudgies.
Puckwudgies.
What
All
is
right.
a puckwudgie?
I'm dying to know.
I'm slowly becoming the puckwudgie guy, so I feel like the weight of responsibility with carrying on the puckwudgie tradition. I heard about these troll attacks. This kind of these very short people who were very hairy, who people would come across in the forest and they would see them sometime later. Like they would see them in their house later, almost like they were trying to stalk them or something like that. And so I started to read more into the mythology of the Wampanoags, and I found this reference to this little monster called a puckwudgie, who was responsible for all the bad things that happened to the Wampanoags. So they started this kind of like mischievous little troll who would, like on one hand do bad things, but then be really sorry and be like, oh, forgive me, and then the Wampanoag creator god Mashop went away for a while on a romantic rendezvous, and while he was gone, they turned from mischievous to evil, and they would burn villages, they would kidnap the children, they would kill the Wampanoag men by leading them through the forest with these bright, flashing lights, which today we would call orbs. So they would lead them into the woods and basically toss them off of cliffs or lead them into the water and drown them. And then they would take their souls, and they could use their souls to gather other souls. So I said, well, that kind of sounds, at least physically, what I'm hearing about in the forest. Then I connected it to another cemetery in New Hampshire, Vale End, where I had investigated once, and similar thing was there. And we had been attacked by these kind of orb lights which were trying to draw us into the woods. And so I kind of took the three things together and went, puckwudgies are still loose in New England. And so I've tracked these all up and down the coast, from Rhode Island to Maine. I've got some reports, I think in Virginia and then in California. And of course the name changes with the people who experience it. Just the same way they called it, I think, Tai-Pai-Wango with these lights. These, flashing souls of humans. We call them today orbs, or wisp of the will. You know, these different terms that have
in a more personified term, I refer to them as elementals.
That's what
probably
I was
an
gonna say. It
excellent...
sounds like a cross between an elemental and a troll, like you said, and a will-o'-the-wisp.
And you'll love this because there's kind of a third level of this, whereas they control that. I've gotten now more reports of these Pukwudgies being connected with what I like to call dark men, which sound somewhat like shadow people, but there seems to be something much more sinister about them. Instead of them just being observers, they seem to have an active feeding role off of the activities of the Pukwudgies. One of the reports that I got of them, or one of the things that really fleshed it out for me, was when I was reading the old tales. There's a very clear point at which they stop referring to evil spirits and they start referring to the devil with a capital D. Oh, wow. So the stories of the Pukwudgies go from evil spirits, evil spirits, evil spirits, and then all of a sudden you have, boom, the Pukwudgies and the devil, capital D. And obviously that reflects Wampanoag's conversion to Christianity, but it also reflects maybe this connection between something darker, something maybe demonic in the forest, or demonic in relation to them and these Pukwudgies. Wow.
Well, this is so fascinating, and so much information. And you realize we're almost out of time?
I didn't actually.
Not before he tells us about Profile Rock.
Profile Rock, okay. Profile Rock is an excellent place, another great example of the crossroads type effect. Supposedly a Profile Rock, which is right across the street from kind of Freetown State Forest proper, but under their jurisdiction. They have a classic profile in rock of a Native American who everyone says is Massasoit. And people have seen a figure, a Native American figure, standing there or praying there, kind of sitting traditionally Indian style. There's this whole mythology now that goes with it that this is King Philip, who went to Profile Rock to connect with Massasoit. And that perhaps the grief of his last night, because he supposedly spent his last night before he was betrayed and caught there, praying to his father, almost in a very kind of Christian kind of way of, you know, if this cup be taken away from me kind of thing. That he knew he was going to be, captured in the next couple of days, and he prayed and prayed and prayed to his father.
It's like a Gethsemane experience.
Right. I would say that except for I always mispronounce it, so thank you very much. I was hoping you'd say it. And that kind of intense energy and that intense praying actually imprinted itself there. And that's what you see when you're at Profile Rock and you see this Native American who's sitting on the rock.
You know, there's so much to this. We're going to have you back for
I'd love to be
Dark Woods 2. You know, okay?
Darker Woods, yes.
Darker Woods, all right, yeah. Well, you promise you'll come back, okay?
I will definitely come back.
All right, excellent, excellent. Sandra, would you say a little bit about our contact info? Last minute we have.
Why not? We at N.E.A.R, New England Anomalies Research, are available to investigate your home or business. We have our email address here, ghostsarnear@cox.net.
The bouncing ball.
We don't, apparently, we don't have a bouncing ball, but we'd also like to hear from you if you have a show suggestion, or if you would even like to be a guest.
Or in
like
the audience,
our friend
like John,
Chris here, or even, we need audience members too. So give us a shout at ghostsarnear@cox.net, and we're going to believe you.
Okay. Hey, Chris, it's been real. Thanks so much, my friend, and we look forward to our visit, not alone with you, okay? You can give us a tour guide, all right?
I definitely will. Anytime
you'd
like.
Sounds like fun.
All right.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us, and any last departing words?
You know, I actually...
I mean that figuratively.
I just have actually finished Ghost of the Bridgewater Triangle as well, which will be out in October. Which is going to be a lot more just kind of ghost stories, straight ghost stories from this area. So I kind of, I go into Rhode Island as well because I consider that part of the traditional Bridgewater Triangle. So that's another thing people want to check out. Always contact me with your Bridgewater Triangle stories. I love that.
All right.
Look for Chris to return in October.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Good night.